Hi everyone, welcome back to MUS119. Today we're going to get into Module 5D and the topic is the vertical palette painting with chord voicings. We're mainly going to explore what open versus closed positions are. So let's get started. Now this is a new term for you. This is called chord voicing, and that is the way we space or arrange the notes of a chord. So a chord includes both triads and seventh chords, and we can even expand upon seventh chords. So we can have not just 3 or 4 notes, but 5, 6, 7 notes, and when they're played together, we can kind of call them, as a chord. So chord voicings affect the sound, the texture, the character of the harmony. So first, let's talk about what a closed position is. A closed position means that all the chord tones in the chord are as close together as possible, usually within 1 octave. So what you see right here is C, E, and G. And if you write that on the piano, if you play that on the piano, we'll have C, E, and G, and that would sound like this, a C major chord. Right? So this is a closed position, and this is something that we have seen again and again in our previous lectures. In the triads and also in the seventh chords, we talked about the pancakes, right? So those are definitely closed positions because all the notes are within this 1 octave range. Now, in contrary to this, what we have is called open position. So in open position, the notes of the chord are spread out instead of being close together. Usually one note is moved up or down an octave to make the chord sound wider and more open. So let's look at this example on the right. We have a C, a G, and then a C again, and then E. Okay, so if you reduce it down, it's basically C, E, and G. We have C, G, C, E. If we reduce it down, it's basically the same thing that we heard before. But when we play closed versus open position, you will hear a significant difference between them. So a closed position sounds like this. It sounds very thick and dense. But the same chord, if you redistribute the notes, so some notes are higher in the octave, some are lower, it sounds like this. And it's even more obvious when you hear this in some kind of orchestration. So not just played on the piano, but when you hear it in, like in a string ensemble. And actually, I could try to do that here on my keyboard. So closed position would sound like this. Open position, same thing. And it just sounds a lot more, open. Open and wide, and somehow it just doesn't sound, that tight and dense anymore. So it's also common to use 4 notes, just like a choir has 4 different voice parts, which are soprano, alto, tenor, and bass. Soprano is the female high voice, alto, female low voice, tenor, male high voice, bass, male low voice. And this gives the chord a fuller and more balanced sound. So the wider the range, the more enticing it sounds, let's say. So since a triad has only 3 notes, one of them, usually the root or the fifth, is often repeated, or more precisely doubled. So what you see here, we have C, G, C, and E, right? In this bottom right corner, we have these notes C, G, C, and E. And by the way, what I included here, these are just shorthand for soprano, alto, like here, soprano, alto, tenor, bass. So if you see 4 notes like this in, say, like a church hymn, that just means that each voice part or each note is defined for each voice part. So we have C, G, and C again. So C is doubled, and then we have E. So in the case of a seventh chord, of course, a seventh chord has 4 notes, so you wouldn't really need to double anything. So you can use all 4 notes in a seventh chord. So let me just plot it on the piano just so that you see a clear visual difference. So before, what we had in a closed position was something like, let's use green, C, E, G. That's this thing. But now what we are using is C, G, C, and E. So that's what it sounds like. Okay, so that is open position. Now, just so that you can both see and hear the difference between open versus closed. So let's first look at this closed position. So here I have a very simple chord progression. So I have C major chord, F major, G major, back to C major. Okay, so this same thing. Now, the same thing redistributed to have this more open quality to it. So this is going to be the open position. And the result is a much fuller, richer, and more luscious sound. So let's do a few exercises. And the exercise is about reducing open position chords into closed position. So what you see here, let me first read what's on the slide. When analyzing harmony, open position chords are usually simplified into closed position to make the chord structure easier to see. So what I would always do is to just write out the letter names, especially if you're new to music. So just go, hey, this is C, this is G, E, and C. Oh, you can already see it's being doubled, right? F, A, F, C. And here, G, G, D, and B, and last, C, G, E, and C. So the first thing you will need to do is to write the root of each chord. So the root is always going to be the lowest note. The lowest note. These are always going to be the root. Well, at least when we're in, we're talking about root position chords. So in this case, let's start with the lowest note. This is C, so I'm just going to write a C here. And the next one is F. Next one is G. And last one is C. Okay, so for now, I'm not really, being very particular about the clef that we use. But actually, guess what? I think just so that we're all on the same page, I'm going to restart this. I'm going to actually use bass clef, just because, the lowest note is bass clef C. So I think that's a much better idea. So let's actually do that. Okay, let's write it in bass clef. I mean, either way, it will be, the same kind of close position chords that you will see. But just so that we avoid any kind of confusion later. So bass clef, let's just start with the root again. So same note here, C, F, G, and C. So the next note higher than C, right, in this chord is going to be E. So just write the E and then G. So there you go. That's the close position for the first chord. This is C major chord. The next one, F, a third above is going to be A, which is here, and then C. And then last, the third one, we have G, and then next is going to be B, which is here, and then D, right? And then we have our very last chord, which is C, E, and G. So that would be your close positions. Now, I didn't really include this. I didn't really include this. And now, I didn't really include this in the slide, but there are a few exceptions. So in Western harmony, we usually have the root, the third, the fifth, and then the 7th, right? In the case of a 7th chord. Now, the root is extremely important because that's what defines the chord, right? So we need the root. The 3rd usually tells you the quality. So whether it's a major or a minor, right? In the case of a C major chord, we have C, E, G. And that's what makes it sound major. And in the case of a minor chord, we have C, E flat, G. So the 3rd is also really important in any chords because that tells you the quality, whether it's major or minor. And now the 5th is where it's kind of important, but not as important as the root or the 3rd. Okay, so in this case, the 5th is like, you can have it. It makes it sound open and sounds nice. But, let me give you an actual example. So if I play a C and a G, the root and the 5th, it sounds really open, but it's very hard to tell whether this is major or minor because it's not defined if we don't have the 3rd. So the 3rd is really important. But instead of that, if we just play the root and the 3rd, in this case, I'm playing C and E, which is the root and the 3rd. You can clearly tell, okay, this is a major chord, right? Even without the 5th, I wasn't playing the G, and without the 5th, it so sounds like a complete chord. Or in the case of a minor, C and E flat, that sounds like a pretty full, sounding harmony. So just know that when we are looking at these open position chords, sometimes because of how the composer wants one line of voice to move to the next melody, the next note, sometimes they just avoid writing the 5th in. So in that case, you might let's just say you have a 7th chord. We have a C, E, G, and then a B flat. That is a complete chord, but there will be times when you are faced with just C, E, and B flat, and you'll be like, oh no, where's that 3rd note, right? Because C, E, B flat, you can't really make a triad out of it because it's not going to look like the perfectly stacked pancakes. There's this huge gap in between. So it's going to look weird. So in that case, just know that, hey, the 5th might be omitted just because, that's how things have been done for the past hundreds of years. So very important. Please remember, root, really important. 3rd, really important. 5th, not so important. So in that case, let's just say that's what you have to to do in the assignments, and you are given something like that, like C, E, and B flat. Well, go ahead and actually write in the complete chord, C, E, G, and B flat, and say, hey, this is a C major minor 7, if that's what they ask you to do. Okay, so that 5th, just know that musicians understand that we don't really need to explicitly use that 5th in a chord to make it sound like how it's supposed to sound. All right, so I guess that's it for today. I hope you all have a great day, and if you have any questions, please feel free to email me. Take care.